battling the relentlessly negative doom and gloom news media. It's the Nick Stenger Show, coming to you live from the Stenger Family Office headquarters. It's your host, Nick Stenger.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nick Stenger Show, episode 156. Can't believe it. We are rolling right into August. Thank you so much for being with us. We are the Stenger Family Office for the past 43 long years. It's been our mission to deliver both clarity and confidence to help secure your financial future. Why do you keep coming to the show every week? Why should you subscribe, like the shows, get them to your friends and family, share them? Definitely subscribe if you're on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. Why should you do that? Because we are living in volatile political times, volatile times in the market. You need to get the clarity, the confidence, the good news for yourself and get it to your friends and family so they can stay on their plan. I do want to turn your attention to our big time event that we do, most anticipated event of the year, 2025 Investor Day, coming to you very quickly, November 7th and 8th, downtown Naperville. Investor Day 2025. It's this year, though. We always are forward-looking. That's why we call it next year, 2025. It's this year, though, November 7th and 8th, downtown Naperville. We are featuring the legendary, and I don't mean that lightly, Dr. Ed Yardeni, and he's going to be with us downtown Naperville at the Hotel Indigo. We've got a wonderful agenda for you. Thursday night, you get in on the 7th, and if you're coming in from out of town, there is a room block. Go ahead and reach out to us. You can schedule online. Producer Owen did remind me there is a RSVP link now in the YouTube description. So thank you very much, Producer Owen. You can go ahead and register while you're watching this show or later afterwards. Don't forget to subscribe while you're watching. And Dr. Ed's going to come in on Friday. Then we do a little reception Thursday night at the Napier Settlements Innovation Gateway. It's a brand new, beautiful center. You're going to love it. And then Friday, we do an awesome stacked set of speakers. We've got Ed Yardeni, we've got Andrew Opdyke, we've got the Family Office panel. That was one of the most highly rated sessions from last year's event. You cannot miss this thing. We even put a QR code on the screen. If you are tech savvy, you can go ahead and pull up your phone. I believe you can do this on iPhone and Android. You take a picture of this QR code in front of you, scan that, click on the registration link. You can register right now while you're watching. You cannot miss this thing. It's already half full. We sent out one email invite. Now, I have been plugging this for a couple weeks in the show, but we sent out one email invite already. This thing is already half full. I would imagine by the time we send out the next email invite in a few weeks from now, it will be completely full. So if you want to get in on this before it fills up, make sure you register now. So with that, we are going to jump into this week's content and article, A House Divided, episode 156. In November 1963, approximately 1 month after ordering troops to be removed from Vietnam, JFK was assassinated in broad daylight. Similarly, founder of the Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln, was assassinated just 6 days after freeing American slaves in the bloodiest battle in U.S. history. When Lincoln famously addressed the Illinois Republican State Convention in Springfield in 1858, he declared in no uncertain terms, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Imagine the gravity of Lincoln's statements back then when our country was already fighting amongst itself just 82 years after escaping the tyrannical rule of King George. And think about where we're at today. President Trump, whose life was spared, I would say only by God. It was literally within millimeters hitting his right ear. If he would have not turned and looked at that chart, President Trump's life would have ended right on the spot. The assassin would have been an assassin. Thankfully, he was not. Obviously, there's a lot of questions about how he was allowed to be on that roof in the first place. At best, it was Secret Service lapses in judgment and security protocol. At worst, it's far, far worse, which possibly some people are pointing to as a deep state operation. Without sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I think there's a lot of reasonable questions you can answer. Like, why wasn't anybody on that roof? It wasn't miles and miles and miles away. It had a direct line of sight to President Trump. They've been talking about killing President Trump on the news media each and every week, every month. They've been trying to politically assassinate him. They've been trying to indict him. They've been trying to ruin his life. And whatever you think about President Trump, whether you love him or hate him, and this is not my endorsement of him or anything like that, but Whether you like the guy or hate the guy, you shouldn't want any of this kind of stuff to happen in our republic. This is not stuff that should be happening in the United States. We should not have a deep state or serious lapses in security, again, at best, that our presidential candidates are having to worry about, whether it's President Biden, whether it's President Trump, whether it's RFK Jr. We should want our people safe and secure. That is the hallmark of a democracy, of a functioning society. In Mexico, we had 30 political candidates assassinated in this last cycle. So the fact of the matter is this is not a hallmark of the United States. This is bad. This is not good for our democracy. We are very fortunate. We have God to thank for President Trump's life being spared. Such a close call. This is not something new that's happened in politics. We've had divided politics in the United States for centuries, for 2 centuries. We've had a few hundred years of political candidates being loved, being hated. We've seen President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, he did free the slaves. He was the founder of the Republican Party. The Republican Party was founded to abolish slavery. They hated him for it. And right after he said he wanted to free the slaves, Lincoln was shot and killed. We all know that story. JFK, again, in 1963, it was literally a month after saying he wanted to remove troops from Vietnam, was shot and killed in broad daylight. We don't have to get into the conspiracy theories there. But President Trump, right before this assassination attempt, also was seen talking to Viktor Orban, talking to possibly Russia about how do we put a plan in place to end the war in the Ukraine? How do we have peace? And this is a big deal. A lot of these New World Order type people, the Great Reset, the Klaus Schwab, all these people that say we want to have war, we want to be constantly in skirmishes and fights, and all these things that keep arising really are just scratching the surface of what goes on. And I want to just explain this, and this is true of how the world operates. I pointed this out a few episodes ago, Markets Love Freedom, that this world is run by a dark power. It is run by Satan. If you are a Christian, if you believe what the Bible says, it says that Satan is the god of this world. He does have rulers and evil people in power. We know about the Israelites who had years and years and years of evil rulers. We know this is true. This is not made up. This is all real. And a lot of this is driven by large banking institutions. A lot of the banking families are behind this. War benefits them. In a lot of cases throughout history, the banking dynasties and the families have been behind most major wars, and not just one side of the war, but both sides, financing the opponents, financing the winners and the losers. Why? Because there's a lot of money to be made on wars in the military-industrial complex, like Dwight D. Eisenhower famously warned against on his way out of the Oval Office, saying, beware of the military-industrial conflict and these people who want to have endless wars. War is a big business. President Trump said he wanted to end wars. JFK said he wanted to end Vietnam. They lost their lives, in my opinion, over this. You may think things are horrible and awful today. I do think there are some issues today we have not seen in a while. But division, if you look at a long period of time, is nothing new in American politics. The recent attempt on former President Trump's life is just an important reminder of the fragile nature of our system. Despite this failed attempt, we must be grateful for how good we have in the United States, where these events do occur, but are thankfully rare. Like I mentioned, Mexico. Thank goodness we don't have that happening. Many of us feel as if today's environment is more divisive than ever. Half the country hates Donald Trump. The other half hates Joe Biden. But the truth is that other U.S. presidents in the past have been just as detested. Obama was hated, you may remember. Bush was hated. Carter was hated. Nixon was hated. The list goes on and on. Part of the reason the political climate, though, today seems so toxic is thanks to social media and the internet. On the positive side of things, today's technology makes it extremely difficult for our leaders to suppress the truth. Why do you think China and North Korea severely limit internet access for their citizens? If you have an iPhone, you literally have a 4K camera in your pocket. You can record anything and everything that's going on. And within 2 seconds, thanks to Elon Musk and Twitter, you can go on X. You can upload that video for millions to watch. Politicians, because of this, are desperately trying to force Facebook, Microsoft, and X to crack down on free speech and to censor information. A lot of these outlets have agreed. They've censored the information to avoid fines. Elon Musk has resisted, and that's why they hate him. Again, you don't have to love Elon Musk, but you should love free speech because free speech is really important. It's really important to understand the fact that just because you don't like what somebody is saying, you should be defending their right to say it. Vivek Ramaswamy at the RNC this week gave a phenomenal speech. I would encourage you to watch it. And he said, hey, if you're a Democrat out there, if you're a liberal, if you're on the left, we may disagree with you, but we stand firmly with you and your right to say whatever you want to say. That is the hallmark of a functioning democracy. Why is it that the tyrants, that the rulers, that the communists, the Marxists, the second anything happens, they severely shut off the internet? They already limit it to begin with. You have China, North Korea, great examples of this, keeping their people behind the bars of technology. They use technology and AI to go after us, to try and surveil and to use it to a negative benefit. But you can't forget the fact that a lot of these technologies are actually phenomenal because they help people get the truth. We had never been in a world today. Now, there are downsides. There's obviously bad information out there that's not true, and you have to have a filter on what you listen to. But we've never lived in a time like we do today where information is at the tip of your fingers and you can access what's really going on and make your own judgment without spin. That is the beauty of X. That's the beauty of Twitter. And again, there are issues with it. There's nothing perfect, but I think we would all agree we're much better off having more free speech rather than less. You see the globalists, you see the New World Order, you're seeing these people who are opposed to free speech saying, hey, free speech can be dangerous. It can be a problem. We should not have as much speech. It can lead to violence and all these issues. Well, that is a risk that we should maybe look at taking, because the reality is if we don't have speech, we know when you give authoritarians power, when you give governments power, they rarely give it back, and they use that information to their advantage. Who controls the narrative really matters. And you saw this with the Trump assassination attempt. Decentralized information. iPhone footage on July 13th showed the shooter sneaking onto the roof just a few hundred feet away from President Trump. The media couldn't control the narrative, and that's what they're so upset about. That's what the legacy media does not like about social media and about free speech and Elon Musk and X, is because anybody can see the truth for themselves. It's very hard to control that narrative. At first, the media said that Trump had fallen down. In an instant, we all knew that wasn't true. That's the beauty of technology. The election is now 109 days away. We know the temperature is set to rise, not cool. In every political season, people wonder if this time is different and if the U.S. is finally finished. I mean, how long have we been hearing about this, that the U.S. is on its last generation, that we're done for, that this is it? And I just think back to all these times where we've heard about this, that things have never been this bad. And I think about the Civil War. We were pretty bad back then. It was a house divided back then. That's where this week's article comes from. Lincoln saying a house divided cannot stand. Things were pretty bad back then. How about the 50s? How about the nuclear crisis? How about all the World War I, World War II? How about all of the doom and gloom we've been through over the years? We have seen this before. And when you listen to these doom and gloomers, I think it's cheap talk. They'll say the world is ending. We typically fail to see their actions line up with their words. The doomers threatened to leave the country, to buy gold, to build a bunker in New Zealand and go into hiding. But then you see them the next day on CNBC leading a pretty reasonable and normal life, living on the coast, not worrying about the exact same predictions and calls that they're making to you. They continue to operate their highly successful businesses, and they don't seem to act like the world's really coming to an end. They're making money on fear. Be careful of the panic porn out there, of the people trying to scare the pants off of you, getting you to do things they would never do themselves. You need to ask yourself the simple question, do these doom and gloomers' actions line up with their words? Because fear sells in a way that good news just can't. Fear appeals to the deepest and darkest part of our human nature, to believe that tomorrow will be worse than it is today. That's actually wired into our DNA. Because guess what? Preparing for the future is a good thing. Worrying about tomorrow, it's not good for your health, but it's an important part of survival. Thinking about hey, what could happen in a week from now, having some preparation. But once you've done your basic preparation, we talk about this in the stock market with your portfolio, making sure you have a rainy day fund. If you're a company, if you're a business, making sure you have cash, you're not taking on leverage. These are all common sense things. I'm not saying to not do any of that, not to worry about those basics and the basics of risk management in general. But if you base your entire life on fear, it will ruin the future for you. If you ask 100 random people on the street if the world's going to be in worse shape in 6 months than it is today, you'll probably get 80 answers that are, yes, it will be worse 6 months from today. But if those 100 people really believe, if those 80 people really believe that, why do they still get out of the bed in the morning, brush their teeth, go to the office, take a vacation, spend time with their family, or plan for the future? Most people that say they're scared about what's to come end up behaving like the future is going to be better than the past. Most of us, even though we might not know it right this second, are optimists, not pessimists. Actions speak louder than words. So what I'll leave you with and what we'll close on before we talk a little bit about the markets is that, yes, the U.S. is divided, but that's nothing new. We've survived incredible amounts of turmoil the past 200 years, thanks to our system of government, our Constitution. The people that say the U.S. is going to be the next Rome and collapse, well, Rome did not have the U.S. Constitution. They did not have our rule of law and personal property rights that have protected this republic, despite the countless experts saying this time it's different. Watch their actions, again, not their words. Most of the doom and gloomers behave like optimists in the long run. We've seen this stuff before. We've been through turmoil before. What we saw with President Trump is troubling. It's awful. It's not good. We've been there before, though, as a country, and we will continue to power forward over the long run. I believe the doom and gloomers are going to be wrong. I believe this election season in particular, we could talk a little bit more about this as we get closer to November, but I believe there's a good chance we're going to have divided government solidly in favor of Republicans. Not that we think Republicans are doing everything perfectly. Certainly, they're making lots of mistakes along the way as well. But the key is divided government, where there is slow movement over time and less globalism, less and less World Economic Forum, less and less tyrannical control in a few hands. And that's what is going on behind the surface. So I'm optimistic for the future. I think we're headed in the right direction. Thank goodness President Trump's life was spared. And let's pray for our country that we continue to head in the right direction. Now, let's talk very quickly on the markets for the last couple minutes of the show. Right now, we're at about 5,600 points on the S&P. We had a major pullback yesterday, about 1.4%. Remember, a lot of the big tech names that have gone up 140, 150% year to date are starting to take a breather. So don't panic over this. Don't worry. Don't lose your perspective. Perspective is key, because if you're saying, hey, Nick, my NVIDIA stock's down 10% in 2 days, well, don't forget, NVIDIA is up 145% just for 2024. So don't worry that you're down 4 or 5% in the short term, or 10%, or even 15% on a stock like that. Now, the higher and higher the PE ratio goes, the price to earnings multiple, the valuation on the company you own, the harder they can fall in a downturn. We've certainly seen that. If you start approaching these 30, 40, 50 PE multiples, 30 times earnings for a stock, you got to be careful, because you need to ask yourself, is that company going to grow into that multiple? It's not going to stay at 30 forever. It's either going to go down because earnings go up, and that's good for you as a shareholder, or it's going to fall because there's not earnings growth. There's not revenue growth. So far at NVIDIA, we've seen phenomenal revenue growth, phenomenal earnings growth. It's actually the stock's trading about a 45 forward price to earnings ratio. I'm not telling you this is investment advice, so don't take this personally and go buy it or sell it or anything like that. But just as an example, NVIDIA is actually trading cheaper today than it did a few years ago on an earnings basis. As long as it continues to grow into these earnings multiples, it should be fine. So don't panic. I don't think we're in a bubble. I don't think we're in the 90s, the late 90s. And these 1.5% pullbacks from time to time are really healthy. They're really good for markets. Now, one area, though, I would watch out for are these value companies, or these legacy, we almost call them zombie companies, where you can ultimately get into what we call a value trap, where you think the stock is trading for a reasonable multiple. You might find it at 20, maybe 18 times earnings, maybe even 22, and you say, that's not that bad. These companies that used to trade at 30 times and now they're 22, you're thinking, that's a pretty good deal. But again, watch the earnings growth, watch the revenue growth. you could be trying to catch a falling knife and pick up a company that's really not that cheap. We've seen that with Walgreens. People thought Walgreens was cheap a year ago at a 10 times forward price to earnings multiple, but then their earnings fell apart, their balance sheets falling apart, and now Walgreens is down, I think it's 50, 60% the past 12 months. Be careful with these value traps. You need to own high quality. That's what we were watching the portfolio for you is watch quality earnings growth. There's a lot of great stocks out there, a lot of great operating businesses that are really running quite well in this environment. It's not just the Mag 7. We went over this a few episodes ago. Go and watch that episode. I think it was last episode, 155, where we went through the mega caps, the large caps, the small caps. There's like 25 mega caps that are up 10% plus year to date 2024. You're sitting here in almost August and you're up 10%. I don't think you have any complaining to do on numbers like that. So don't lose your gratitude. Go back to your financial plan. Again, this is why a financial plan is so important. A goals-based plan that says this is our required target rate of return, 7-8% annualized. Now, annualized return means some years are going to be much better. Some years are going to be 12, 15, 20% return. Some years are going to be down 4 or 5 or 10 or 15%. But over the long run, if you're still averaging at that 7 or 8%, and you're already in August and you're at 10% return on Procter & Gamble, fill in the blank value company, don't be so upset about that. That's not a bad return for August. We still got a little bit of baseball left to play for the year. But as you go into 2025, earnings are expected to be really good. That's why we have the S&P where it's at 5,600 points. But then even further, I know this sounds like a long-run expectation or long-range projection, but by the end of next year, at the end of 2025, we're already going to be trading on 2026 expected earnings, which are now projected at $315. And this isn't the Nick Stenger number. This is FactSet, who does all the research behind this. And there's a lot of other sources that would agree with that. There's Ed Yardeni, who's coming in November. He does a earnings estimate. He thinks it's actually going to be higher. But even if you go off the FactSet estimate that all the major banks, all of Wall Street uses to base their estimates on the S&P, we're looking at $315 for 2026. And when you multiply that by 20 times earnings, you're trading the S&P around 62, 6,300, maybe upwards of 6,500, like Dr. Ed says, in the next, call it 18 months or so. So don't lose sight of the math of the market. Don't lose sight of the long run of earnings, of what's really going on behind the surface. We've got so many great trends happening. Don't forget, there's all these companies that aren't necessarily AI companies, but are using technology or using AI, like banks, like healthcare companies that are saving money on reducing some costs, reducing overhead by using technology. So don't lose sight of the market breadth that's coming back. That's what we call it, where the rest of the companies that are outside of the Mag 7 start doing well. We have a couple hundred large caps that are up, a couple hundred mid caps that are up, and a couple hundred small caps that are all up over 10% year to date 2024. So these numbers are quite good. The media narrative that there's no market breadth, that it's only 7 stocks, is, like I told you last time, it's just not based in reality. So stay grounded in reality. Stay grounded in the math, the data, statistics, because I'm telling you, like I explained in the article this week, we are just going to get more and more volatile as we approach November. It's going to get crazier. It's not going to get less crazy. And I firmly believe this assassination attempt on President Trump is just scratching the surface of what could happen coming later this year in the political cycle. So just be aware of the fact that it's going to get more volatile. We really haven't had any crazy volatility here the past 12, 18, even 24 months. So brace yourself mentally for, hey, we could see some downside in the short term, but long run, the market will trade on earnings. We're already starting to see rate projections come down. Now, I don't necessarily 100% agree that we're going to see these massive cuts later this year, like some people are saying. So we're still bracing for that portfolio-wise. However, we do think by 2025, we're going to have lower rates, definitely by 2026. That's going to help earnings. If we have divided government, or if we have Republicans, for example, in all 3 branches of government, there's a good shot the tax cuts actually get extended and lowered. President Trump was talking about lowering the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%, which is a huge boost for earnings and profits and for your portfolio. So you should be voting with your wallet. I'll just leave it at that. Vote with your wallet. Use common sense here in November, because lower taxes not only mean higher profits for companies and higher stock market prices, but it actually means more revenue for the federal government. When people were roasting Trump's tax plan, which was really a brainchild of Larry Kudlow and some of these great economists that you can watch, a lot, Art Laffer is one of them, that was projected that Trump's tax plan was going to cause all these problems with budget. But Trump's tax plan, actually, the tax cuts led to more receipts than ever, record revenue receipts for the IRS than ever before on a federal government level, thanks to companies making more money and bringing that money back home to the United States, onshoring. So this is good for all of us. We should want more of this. We should want entrepreneurs to lead the charge. We want the government to shrink in size. The one problem we keep having with the federal government is it just gets too big. It gets too big under the left. It gets too big under the right. They love to consolidate control and power, no matter what side they're on. And eventually we need to get back to a balanced budget, which I think we're working towards. We need to get to common sense where we shrink the size of government. And you saw this in Argentina. I've mentioned this before. Javier Milei came into Argentina. He has all the government departments on the whiteboard. He rips them off one at a one and says, "You're done. This one's done. That one's done." And the Argentina stock market went up like 45%, rallying on the hopes that Argentina is finally going to have a turnaround. The opposite's true in Mexico. They elected a socialist. The Mexican stock market went down 26% overnight. So that's the reality. Investors love policy. And as an investor, which most of you watching are, you should be voting for good policy that's going to favor entrepreneurship over time. So I'll leave you with one closing thought. Stay bullish, stay on your course, do not panic, stay optimistic. Things will work out in the long run. Things will be okay. We're in a weird time politically. It's certainly troubling in some aspects. But remember, like I said a few weeks ago, God is in control in the end. We are not. We can trust him. He is in control, and everything will work out exactly how it's supposed to in the long run. So don't panic. Don't waste a second worrying your life away. Don't worry about these things. After you've done your careful risk management, after you've gotten your financial plan in order, your financial house in order, go outside, go for a walk, turn off your phone, turn off the TV, go for a walk, enjoy the outdoors, spend time with your friends and family. That's what it's all about. Thank you for being with us. Episode 156. We are going to see you next week. Episode 157, I'll be coming to you live from Houston, visiting a lot of our ExxonMobil families. We'll see you next week. Can't wait to see you. And we'll see you for episode 157. Thanks for being here.